The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Maya tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear and reached for her third cup of coffee. It was only Tuesday, but the office clock already showed 7:30 p.m. Around her, the modern open-plan office of Bright Spark Marketing had emptied out hours ago. Only the cleaning staff moved between desks, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces. Maya's desk stood in sharp contrast to the polished minimalism of the workplace. While other workstations displayed a single potted plant or framed photo, hers overflowed with organized chaos, stacks of notes, sketches for upcoming campaigns, and 3 different planners. A small army of sticky notes bordered her computer monitor, each one containing reminders, client preferences, or ideas that had struck her at odd moments. For 3 years, Maya had worked as a production assistant at Bright Spark, one of the city's most prestigious marketing agencies. The company occupied the top 2 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering sweeping views that Maya rarely had time to appreciate. The agency handled accounts for national brands and had a reputation for cutting-edge campaigns that won industry awards. Tonight, like most nights, Maya was putting final touches on presentation materials that weren't technically her responsibility. Tomorrow morning, Elise would deliver these slides to the leadership team and a major client. And tomorrow morning, like every morning before, everyone would applaud Elise's brilliance while Maya remained invisible in her shadow. Still here? Don't you ever go home? The night security guard stopped by her desk, his keys jingling at his hip. Maya looked up with tired eyes but managed a genuine smile. Just finishing some things for tomorrow's big meeting. I'll head out soon, promise. You said that yesterday, too. He shook his head with grandfatherly concern. Meanwhile, I bet your boss left at 5 sharp. Maya didn't correct him. Elise wasn't technically her boss, though everyone treated her that way. On paper, they were both part of the creative team, with Elise holding the title of senior creative director while Maya remained a production assistant, despite doing work that went far beyond her job description. The guard continued his rounds as Maya turned back to her screen. She was adding research data that would strengthen the presentation's core argument. Information she'd gathered by speaking directly with the client's customers, something Elise had deemed beneath her pay grade. Maya's phone buzzed with a text. It was Elise. Hope you're fixing those transitions like we discussed. Also need you to add the competitor analysis section. Early meeting tomorrow, be in by 7 to print handouts. No, please. No, thank you. Not even a question mark to soften the demands. Maya typed back a simple will do and set her phone face down on the desk. This was the rhythm of their professional relationship. Elise shined in client meetings and presentations. She had the kind of magnetic presence that made people lean forward when she spoke. Her confident smile and quick thinking under pressure had earned her 3 promotions in 4 years. Meanwhile, Maya handled the background work that made Elise's performances possible. She researched market trends, gathered customer insights, designed visuals, and fixed emergencies when they inevitably arose. When clients called with concerns after hours, they reached Maya, not Elise. When deadlines tightened impossibly, Maya was the one who stayed late to ensure everything was delivered on time. The agency's leadership team saw only Elise's polished final presentations. They never noticed the foundation Maya built beneath each successful project. Maya stretched and glanced at her reflection in the darkened window. At 28, the long hours were beginning to show in the shadows under her eyes. Friends from college had stopped inviting her to weeknight gatherings, knowing she would cancel at the last minute when work inevitably ran long. Just until I get the promotion, she had told herself for the past 2 years. Just until someone noticed her contributions and moved her up from her entry-level title. Just until she could afford to move out of her tiny studio apartment with the leaky faucet and noisy neighbors. The next morning arrived too quickly. Maya had left the office at 10 p.m. only to return before sunrise. She placed freshly printed handouts at each seat in the conference room, double-checking that the presentation loaded correctly on the main screen. The room slowly filled with senior executives and account managers, all greeting each other with easy familiarity. Elise swept in at 8:55, 5 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin. Her tailored blazer and confident stride drew attention immediately. She nodded to Maya, who handed her a copy of the presentation notes. Any changes? Elise asked quietly. Added the consumer research data on slides 12 through 15, Maya replied. And fix the graphics on the competitive analysis. Perfect. Elise's smile was genuine, if brief. Whatever her faults, she appreciated competence. The client's running late. They just called from the lobby. The agency's CEO, Thomas, entered the room with his usual energy. At 50-something, he maintained the enthusiastic demeanor of someone half his age. Team, are we ready to blow some minds today? Everyone nodded and murmured agreement. Thomas spotted Maya standing by the wall. Maya, could you grab some more water bottles for the table? And make sure reception knows to send the client straight back when they arrive. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded and slipped out of the room, even though both tasks had been handled 20 minutes earlier. By the time she returned, she had missed the opening of the meeting and found all the chairs filled. She leaned against the back wall, notebook in hand, ready to document feedback and action items that would inevitably become her responsibility. And now, Elise will take us through the campaign concept, Thomas announced, gesturing toward Elise with obvious pride. Elise stood and advanced to the first slide of the presentation, the one Maya had redesigned. At midnight, when she realized the original layout wouldn't effectively communicate their message as, "You'll see," Elise began, her voice confident and measured. "We've approached this challenge from a unique angle." For the next 30 minutes, Elise walked the room through strategies and concepts that Maya had spent weeks developing. She didn't claim direct credit, but neither did she acknowledge the team effort behind the work. To everyone present, these ideas were simply part of the Bright Spark offering, with Elise as their natural spokesperson. The client representatives nodded and took notes. Maya could tell from their body language that they were impressed. When Elise reached the consumer research section, the additional material Maya had added overnight, the client's marketing director leaned forward with particular interest. "This is fascinating data," she said. "It aligns perfectly with some internal research we've been conducting." "How did you gather these insights?" Elise barely hesitated. "We believe in going beyond surface-level analysis. Our approach involves direct consumer engagement through multiple channels." It was a perfect non-answer, polished and professional. What Elise didn't say was that Maya had spent weekends conducting interviews and analyzing responses because the agency hadn't approved budget for formal research. As the meeting concluded, handshakes and congratulations circled the room. The client left satisfied, promising to follow up by the end of the week. The agency executives were already celebrating another successful presentation. "Elise, absolutely brilliant work," Thomas said, clapping her on the shoulder. "That consumer research piece really sealed the deal." Other team leaders gathered around Elise, offering praise and comments. Maya began collecting empty water bottles and scattered papers, invisible as always in these moments of triumph. "We should discuss your role in the upcoming leadership retreat," Thomas told Elise as they walked toward the door. "I think you're ready for more responsibility in the agency." Maya kept her expression neutral as she straightened the conference room. Another day, another project where her contributions would go unrecognized. 3 years of pouring herself into this job, of sacrificing evenings and weekends, of generating ideas that won accounts and impressed clients, and she remained the person who ordered lunch and made coffee runs. Later that afternoon, while updating the project management system with new deadlines, Maya received an email notification. The weekly agency newsletter included an announcement. "Congratulations to Elise Parker for securing the Burton account expansion. Her innovative approach and consumer insights impressed the client and resulted in a contract renewal with increased scope." Maya stared at the words on her screen, fighting the familiar tightness in her chest. She glanced across the office where Elise was accepting congratulations from colleagues who stopped by her desk. For a moment their eyes met, and Maya thought she detected a flicker of something like guilt in Elise's expression. But it vanished so quickly, Maya wondered if she'd imagined it. Maya took a deep breath and returned to her work. The next deadline was already approaching, and regardless of who received the credit, she took pride in doing her job well. Someday, she told herself, someday someone would notice. Until then, she would continue building excellence from the shadows, gathering experience and ideas that would eventually become her stepping stones into the light. The news spread through Bright Spark marketing like wildfire on a dry summer day. Maya first noticed something was wrong when she arrived at work and found a cluster of account managers huddled near the coffee station, their voices hushed, but their expressions animated. She caught fragments of conversation as she filled her mug. Just like that. Double the salary. What about the Westfield presentation? Maya felt a chill despite the warmth of her coffee cup. The Westfield account was their biggest client, and the presentation was scheduled for next week. She'd already spent dozens of hours preparing materials for it, though as usual, Elise would be the one delivering the pitch. Thomas, the CEO, emerged from his office with the agency's head of talent management beside him. His normally cheerful face looked drawn, and he kept running his hand through his thinning hair. Meeting in the main conference room in 15 minutes, he announced to the entire floor. Everyone needs to be there. Maya hurried to her desk and found a brief email from Elise that had arrived at 11:30 p.m. the previous night. Got an unexpected opportunity. Need to take it. Sorry for the short notice. You've been great to work with. That was it. After 3 years of working side by side of Maya supporting Elise's rise to stardom within the agency, all she got was a 5-sentence email. No phone call. No proper goodbye. The conference room filled quickly, people whispering theories to each other as they took their seats. Maya slid into a chair near the back, noting the unusual tension in the air. Thomas stood at the front, waiting until everyone was settled before he spoke. I'll get right to the point, he said, his voice tight. Elise has accepted a position with Rivera and Associates. She left a resignation letter with security last night and has already cleared out her desk. A collective gasp swept through the room. Rivera and Associates was their biggest competitor, an agency that had been trying to poach the Westfield account for years. This puts us in a challenging position, Thomas continued. Elise was led on several major accounts, including Westfield, whose presentation is scheduled for next Thursday. The head of talent management stepped forward. We're already reaching out to our contacts to begin a search for a new creative director. But realistically, we won't have someone in place before the Westfield presentation. The room erupted with questions and concerns. Can we postpone? Does Westfield know yet? What about the other accounts she was handling? Thomas raised his hands to quiet the room. We're exploring all options. I've already called Westfield's CMO to request a postponement, but they're flying in specifically for this presentation. Their entire marketing strategy for next year depends on our recommendations. Maya's mind raced. She knew every detail of the Westfield project. She had conducted the research, drafted the strategy, created the mock-ups, and written most of the presentation that Elise would have delivered. She knew things about the client that even Thomas didn't know. Their real concerns, their internal politics, the pressure their marketing team was under from their board. She took a deep breath and raised her hand. Thomas looked surprised. Production assistants rarely spoke in full team meetings. Yes, Maya? Her voice came out steadier than she expected. I can present to Westfield. I've been working on all aspects of their account alongside Elise. A beat of silence followed, then several people chuckled. Chen from the strategy team turned to look at her with raised eyebrows. No offense, but Westfield is expecting our top creative talent. Not a helper. Assistant, corrected Lisa from account management, though her tone suggested the distinction hardly mattered. Thomas frowned but didn't rebuke them. Maya, I appreciate your willingness to step up, but this presentation requires someone with experience leading client relationships. Westfield is our biggest account. The talent manager nodded in agreement. We need to find someone senior who can step in. Perhaps we can borrow a creative director from our West Coast office. The conversation moved on as if Maya hadn't spoken. Plans were made to reach out to the West Coast office to see if any other senior team members could take over Elise's projects, to review what information they could salvage from her files. Maya sat silently, her face burning with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. They had laughed at her, actually laughed as if the idea of her handling an important client was a joke. Despite having done most of the work already, she was still just the helper, the coffee fetcher, the person who stayed late to fix other people's mistakes. As the meeting wound down, Thomas assigned emergency tasks to various team members. Lisa, contact the West Coast office. Chen, review all of Elise's current projects and prepare status reports. Joey, reach out to her other clients and assure them we're handling the transition. He glanced at Maya. Maya, can you gather all the files for the Westfield presentation? We'll need everything organized for whoever takes over. Of course. Even in crisis, she was still just the organizer, the gatherer, the support staff, Already on it, she replied coolly, rising from her seat and heading straight to her desk. For the rest of the day, the office hummed with crisis energy. People rushed between meetings, made urgent phone calls, and huddled around computer screens reviewing Elise's projects. Maya worked methodically, pulling together every piece of the Westfield presentation into a comprehensive package. She added detailed notes on each section, explaining the strategy behind creative choices and highlighting key points the presenter should emphasize. At 6:30 p.m., when most of the staff had finally left for the day, Thomas stopped by her desk. He looked exhausted. "How's it coming?" he asked, nodding at her computer screen. "I've compiled everything," Maya said. "The complete presentation, all the research data, competitive analysis, creative briefs, and notes from previous client meetings." Thomas nodded. "Good work. The West Coast office can't spare anyone next week, so we're still figuring out who will present." Maya hesitated, then decided to try one more time. "I really do know this account inside and out, Thomas. I've been handling most of the background work for months." He gave her a distracted pat on the shoulder. "That's what makes you such a valuable assistant, Maya. But Westfield expects to hear from someone at Elise's level or higher." Their CMO specifically mentioned how impressed they were with her last presentation. The presentation Maya had stayed up 3 nights in a row to create. The one where she had developed the breakthrough concept that Westfield had praised Elise for delivering. "I understand," she said. Though she didn't. "Not really." Thomas checked his watch. "There's an emergency leadership meeting tomorrow morning at 7:30. Can you make sure the Westfield files are available to everyone by then?" Of course. After he left, Maya sat alone in the dimming office, staring at her computer screen. A familiar feeling of invisibility washed over her. For 3 years, she had been the backbone of so many successful projects, yet no one saw her as capable of stepping into the spotlight. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. She opened it to find an industry newsletter announcing, "Star Creative Director Elise Parker joins Rivera and Associates." The article praised Elise's innovative approach and quoted her as saying she was excited to bring fresh perspectives to her new agency. Fresh perspectives. Maya almost laughed. She wondered if Elise would recreate the filing system Maya had developed, or if she would find someone else to stay late fixing her presentation slides. Maya closed the newsletter and turned back to her work. The Westfield presentation was good, she knew that, but it could be better. It could be exceptional. And suddenly, with crystal clarity, Maya knew what she had to do. Instead of going home, she ordered delivery and settled in for a long night. If they wouldn't let her present to Westfield, she would create something so compelling, so perfectly tailored to the client's needs, that it wouldn't matter who delivered it. She would pour everything she knew into this presentation, not for Elise, not for Thomas, not even for the agency, but for herself, to prove what she was capable of, even if no one else could see it yet. By midnight, the office was completely empty except for the occasional security guard making rounds. Maya had spread her notes across 3 desks pushed together. She'd identified weak points in the original presentation and was systematically strengthening each one. The security guard stopped by, now familiar with her late nights. "You're still here? Even with your boss gone?" Maya looked up from her work and gave him a tired smile. "Especially with my boss gone." He shook his head. "Don't they pay people overtime for this kind of dedication?" "It's not about overtime," Maya said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "It's about proving something. To them?" he asked, nodding toward the executive offices. Maya considered the question. "To myself, I think," the guard smiled. "Well, don't stay too late. Whatever you're proving, it'll be more convincing if you're awake for it." As he continued his rounds, Maya turned back to her work with renewed purpose. The Westfield presentation wasn't just a crisis to be managed. It was an opportunity. For the first time, she could create something exactly the way she envisioned it, without Elise's revisions or simplifications. By the time she finally left the office at 3 a.m., Maya had completely transformed the presentation. Gone was the flashy but superficial approach Elise had favored. In its place was something more substantial, a strategy rooted in deep customer insights and market analysis, with creative concepts that directly addressed the challenges Westfield had confided to Maya during their private conversations. As she caught a rideshare home, watching the city lights blur past the window, Maya felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her. Not hope exactly, but determination. Whether they let her present to Westfield or not, whether they recognized her contributions or continued to overlook them, she knew her own worth now, and somehow, some way, she would make them see it too. Maya woke to the harsh buzz of her alarm after just 3 hours of sleep. Her tiny apartment was still dark, the early morning light barely filtering through the blinds. For a moment, she considered calling in sick. Her body ached from hunching over her computer all night, and her eyes felt gritty from staring at screens for too long. But something inside her refused to give in to exhaustion. The emergency leadership meeting was happening this morning, with or without her, and she needed to be there, even if only in her usual role as the silent note-taker. She showered quickly, the cold water shocking her system awake. As she dressed, she caught her reflection in the mirror and paused. The woman staring back at her looked tired but determined, with a glint in her eye that hadn't been there before. Today would be different somehow. She could feel it. The agency was already buzzing with activity when she arrived at 7:15. Several senior staff members had camped out in the conference room overnight, their rumpled clothes and empty coffee cups evidence of their own late night. Thomas looked like he hadn't slept at all. "Maya, thank goodness," he said when he spotted her. "Did you bring the Westfield files?" She handed him a tablet. "Everything's uploaded to the shared drive organized by section. I've also prepared printed copies for the meeting." He barely looked at her as he took the tablet. "Perfect. We've got the CMO from the Los Angeles office flying in this afternoon. He'll take over the presentation." Maya nodded, keeping her face carefully neutral despite the disappointment washing through her. "I made some updates to the presentation overnight. I think they strengthen our approach." Thomas was already walking away. Great. Just make sure everything's accessible to Greg when he arrives." The leadership meeting began promptly at 7:30. Though Maya wasn't technically part of the leadership team, no one questioned her presence. She was simply expected to be there, taking notes, handling technical issues, fetching whatever was needed. The invisibility that had frustrated her for so long now worked to her advantage as she settled into a corner seat. "The situation is this," Thomas began. "We have exactly 6 days until the Westfield presentation. Their entire executive team will be here, expecting to see our strategy for their global rebranding. Greg from Los Angeles will be our presenter, but he knows nothing about the account or the work we've done so far." Lisa from account management frowned. "Is that really our best option? Greg's great, but Westfield has been working with us, with Elise, for months. Won't this feel like a bait and switch?" "We don't have a choice," Thomas said firmly. "We need someone with Greg's level of experience and authority. No one else here was closely enough involved with the account." Maya bit her tongue, remembering how they had laughed at her suggestion yesterday. Chen pulled up a document on the main screen. "I've reviewed all of Elise's current projects. Westfield is obviously the most urgent, but we also have the Patterson retail campaign due in 2 weeks, and the healthcare pitch for Northside Medical the following Monday." The mood in the room darkened further. 3 major projects, all headed by Elise, all due within weeks. "Greg can only handle Westfield," Thomas said. "We'll need to figure out the others separately." For the next hour, the team discussed logistics, client expectations, and damage control. Maya took detailed notes, but her mind was working on something else. While they talked in circles about how to pacify nervous clients, she was mentally refining the presentation she had rebuilt overnight. By the time the meeting ended, everyone looked more stressed than when they began. They had a plan, but not a good one. Greg would fly in, spend 2 days cramming information about Westfield, then deliver a presentation he barely understood to a client he had never met. "Maya, can you put together a briefing packet for Greg?" Thomas asked as people filed out of the conference room. "Just the essentials. He won't have time to go through everything." "Of course," Maya replied. "When does he arrive?" "His flight gets in at 4:30. He'll come straight to the office." As the day progressed, Maya divided her time between preparing Greg's briefing packet and polishing her revised presentation. Around lunchtime, a call came in from the Westfield marketing team. Since Elise was gone and Greg hadn't arrived yet, the call was directed to Maya. "Hello, this is Maya from Bright Spark," she answered, expecting to simply take a message. "Maya, just the person I wanted to speak with." It was Catherine, the junior marketing manager at Westfield. Though she wasn't the CMO, Catherine was the person Maya had worked with most closely, the one who had shared insider knowledge about what the company really needed from this rebranding. I heard about Elise, Catherine continued. What a shock. Yes, it's been quite a scramble here, Maya admitted. I bet. Listen, I'm calling because I've been reviewing the preliminary materials you sent last week, and I had some thoughts about the market positioning section. For the next 30 minutes, Maya engaged with Catherine in a detailed discussion about Westfield's brand identity and market position. She took notes, asked insightful questions, and shared some of her own thinking, the kind of productive conversation she usually facilitated but was never credited for. This is exactly what we need, Catherine said, sounding relieved. You really understand what we're looking for. Will you be at the presentation on Thursday? Maya hesitated. Yes, I'll be there. But we'll have our creative director from the Los Angeles office presenting. Oh, Catherine's disappointment was audible. Well, as long as he captures what we just discussed, I'm sure it will be fine. After the call ended, Maya sat quietly for a moment, her mind racing. Catherine and the Westfield team trusted her. They valued her insights. If only the leadership at Bright Spark could see what she was capable of. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. The entire agency was in crisis mode, with teams reorganizing to cover Elise's projects and account managers making reassuring calls to clients. Maya finished Greg's briefing packet and left it at reception for his arrival, then returned to her desk to add the new insights from Catherine into her version of the presentation. At 5:15, she heard a commotion near the front entrance and looked up to see a tall man in an expensive suit being greeted enthusiastically by Thomas. Greg had arrived. She watched as he was whisked into Thomas's office, the door closing firmly behind them. Maya continued working, losing track of time as she refined slide after slide. The office gradually emptied as even the most dedicated employees eventually went home. By 8 p.m., only a handful of people remained, including Thomas and Greg, still holed up in the corner office. As Maya was gathering her things to leave, Thomas's door finally opened. He spotted her and waved her over. Maya, good, you're still here. Have you met Greg? Greg, this is Maya, our production assistant who's been working on the Westfield account. Greg gave her a quick professional smile and a firm handshake. Thanks for the briefing packet. Very helpful. I've also updated the presentation with some new insights from Westfield's marketing team, Maya said. They called with feedback this afternoon. Thomas frowned slightly. You took a call from Westfield? Their junior marketing manager called with questions about the materials we sent last week, Maya explained. Since no one else was available to speak with her, I took the call. Greg raised an eyebrow. What kind of feedback did they give? For the next few minutes, Maya summarized her conversation with Catherine, explaining the subtle shifts in Westfield's priorities and how they might affect the presentation. Both men listened with increasing interest. That's valuable insight, Greg said when she finished. Can you incorporate that into the deck tonight? I'd like to review the latest version first thing tomorrow. It wasn't a request so much as an expectation. Maya had already been at the office for 14 hours and had barely slept the night before, but instead of pointing this out, she simply nodded. I've already started on the revisions. I can have it ready by morning. Excellent, Thomas said, already turning his attention back to Greg. Now, about dinner, there's a great steakhouse just down the block. The two men walked out, deep in conversation about tomorrow's schedule, neither of them glancing back at Maya. She watched them go, a mixture of frustration and resolve hardening within her. If they wouldn't give her a chance to shine, she would have to create that chance for herself. Instead of continuing to work on the presentation that Greg would deliver, Maya opened a new file and began building something different. A backup plan, a presentation that reflected her vision, her understanding of the client, her strategy, not watered down or filtered through anyone else's perspective. As the night deepened around her, Maya worked with growing confidence. She pulled data from research she had conducted months ago, but Elise had deemed unnecessary. She integrated insights from her countless conversations with the Westfield team. She crafted a narrative that told the story not just of where Westfield was, but where they could go, a vision more ambitious and authentic than anything Elise had proposed. When the security guard made his rounds at midnight, he shook his head at the sight of her. Again, doesn't anyone else work at this company? Maya smiled tiredly. They work. I just work differently. Whatever they're paying you, it's not enough, he said as he continued on his way. You might be right about that, Maya murmured to herself. By 2 a.m., She had completed 2 separate presentations. The official one for Greg, updated with Catherine's feedback but still following the safe, conventional approach the leadership expected, and her own version, bolder, more innovative, addressing challenges the client hadn't even articulated yet. She saved both files, then hesitated over the keyboard. The sensible thing would be to delete her version. To know her place, keep her head down, continue being the reliable assistant who made everyone else look good. Instead, she sent both presentations to her personal email as backup, then closed her computer. As she gathered her things to leave, exhaustion finally catching up with her, Maya looked around the darkened office. For 3 years she had poured herself into this place, into work that others claimed credit for. The unfairness of it all should have crushed her spirit long ago. But something had changed. Elise's departure hadn't just created a crisis, it had created an opening. And Maya was ready to step through it, regardless of who tried to block her way. She walked out into the cool night air, her mind still buzzing with ideas despite her exhaustion. The weekend stretched ahead of her. 2 precious days to refine her approach, to prepare for whatever opportunity might arise. For the first time in years, Maya felt not just determination, but genuine hope. The star performer was gone, but the helper was finally ready to step into the spotlight. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Maya had spent the weekend refining both presentations, catching up on sleep and preparing herself mentally for whatever might happen. Monday through Wednesday had passed in a blur of last-minute preparations, with Greg at the center of a whirlwind of activity. The creative director from Los Angeles had commandeered the largest conference room, where he'd been drilling the team on Westfield's history, preferences, and expectations. Maya had attended every session, quietly taking notes while Greg absorbed the essentials of an account that she knew inside and out. Now, as she rode the elevator up to the office on Thursday morning, Maya felt surprisingly calm. She had done everything she could. She had updated the official presentation based on Greg's feedback, created detailed speaking notes for him, and compiled supporting materials for any questions that might arise. She had also kept her own version of the presentation ready, saved on both her laptop and a USB drive that now felt heavy in her pocket. The office was transformed when she stepped off the elevator. Fresh flowers adorned the reception desk. The cleaning crew had worked overtime to make every surface shine. Meeting rooms had been restocked with premium snacks and beverages. Bright Spark was pulling out all the stops for Westfield. Thomas intercepted her almost immediately. "Maya, there you are. Greg wants to go through the speaking notes one more time before the run-through at 10, and the Westfield team just called. Their flight was delayed, so the presentation will start at 2 instead of 1. She nodded, setting down her bag. "I'll check with Greg right away. Do we need to adjust the lunch order?" "Already taken care of." Thomas looked more relaxed than he had all week. "Greg's got everything under control. I watched him practice last night. He's got the material down cold. Westfield won't even remember Elise's name after today." Maya forced a smile. "That's great news. Oh, and the CMO mentioned he'd like you in the room during the presentation, just in case there are any technical issues or if they have questions about research data." Her heart skipped. "Of course. I'll be there." As Thomas hurried off to his next crisis, Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She would be in the room. It wasn't the same as presenting, but it was something. A foot in the door, at least. The morning passed quickly. Greg ran through the presentation twice, his delivery growing smoother each time. He was undeniably good, confident without being arrogant, knowledgeable despite his crash course in all things Westfield. Maya could see why Thomas had been so eager to fly him in. At noon, the team broke for a quick lunch. Maya ate at her desk, reviewing both presentations one final time. The official version was solid, safe, professional, entirely adequate. Her version was different, bolder but also more aligned with what she knew Westfield truly needed. The gap between them represented everything she had been holding back during her years in Elise's shadow. At 1:30, Maya gathered her materials and headed to the main conference room to set up. She connected her laptop to the projector, loaded Greg's presentation, and tested the audio system. Everything worked perfectly. As she arranged handouts at each seat, she could hear the growing buzz of conversation in the hallway. The Westfield team had arrived. Thomas appeared at the door, flanked by Greg and a group of well-dressed executives. Westfield's leadership team. Maya recognized Catherine, who gave her a warm smile and a small wave. The others she knew only from video calls or photographs in Elise's briefing materials. And this is Maya, our production assistant who's been supporting the Westfield account, Thomas said as they entered the room. Maya and I have spoken several times, Catherine said, stepping forward to shake her hand. Your insights have been tremendously helpful. The Westfield CEO, a tall woman with short gray hair, glanced at Maya with mild interest. You're the one who compiled the customer journey research, correct? Impressive work. Maya felt a rush of gratitude. At least the client recognized her contributions even if her own agency didn't. Thank you. I'm glad you found it valuable. People began taking seats around the large conference table. Maya moved to a chair in the corner, slightly behind where Greg would stand. Her laptop remained connected to the projector, the official presentation ready to go. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. Thomas called the meeting to order with a practiced smile. Thank you all for being here today. Before we begin, I want to address the elephant in the room. As you know, Elise Parker is no longer with Bright Spark. However, we're fortunate to have Greg Mitchell, creative director from our Los Angeles office, who has been thoroughly briefed on the Westfield rebranding initiative and is excited to share our strategy with you today. Greg stood, buttoning his jacket with easy confidence. Thank you, Thomas. And thank you to the Westfield team for your flexibility. While I may be new to your account, I assure you that Bright Spark's commitment to your brand remains unwavering. He nodded to Maya, who pressed the button to advance to the first slide. The presentation began smoothly, with Greg providing an overview of Westfield's current market position and the challenges they faced in an increasingly digital retail landscape. The client team listened attentively, occasionally making notes but showing little reaction. As Greg moved to the strategy section, Maya noticed Catherine frowning slightly. The junior marketing manager leaned over to whisper something to her CEO, who nodded in response. Something was off. Greg continued, unaware of the subtle shift in the room. He was delivering the material perfectly, just as they had rehearsed. But Maya could feel the energy dropping. This wasn't what Westfield had expected. The safe, conventional approach that had seemed adequate in rehearsal now felt flat and uninspired in front of the actual client. When Greg paused for questions halfway through, the Westfield CEO spoke up. I appreciate the thoroughness of your analysis, Greg, but I'm not seeing anything here that we couldn't get from any agency on Madison Avenue. When we hired Bright Spark, we were promised innovative thinking. So far, this feels standard. Thomas jumped in quickly. I assure you the creative concepts in the second half of the presentation are anything but standard. Greg smiled smoothly. Exactly. We're laying the groundwork now, but the real breakthroughs are coming up. But Maya knew better. The second half contained the same safe thinking as the first, polished and professional, but nothing that would excite a client looking for true innovation. As Greg resumed the presentation, she saw the opportunity slipping away. Westfield would leave disappointed, and they would likely take their business elsewhere. Her hand moved to her pocket, fingers closing around the USB drive. This was the moment she had prepared for. But did she have the courage to seize it? As Greg struggled to regain the room's energy, Thomas caught Maya's eye and gave her a questioning look. He could feel it too. They were losing the client. Before she could second-guess herself, Maya stood and moved to Greg's side. Excuse me, Greg. There seems to be a technical issue with this version of the presentation. May I suggest we switch to the backup? Greg looked confused but stepped aside graciously. Of course. With hands that were surprisingly steady, Maya disconnected her laptop, inserted the USB drive, and loaded her version of the presentation. Thomas shot her a warning glance, but it was too late to stop her now. My apologies for the interruption, she said, turning to face the Westfield team. While we resolve this issue, perhaps I could walk you through some additional research insights that might address some of your concerns. The Westfield CEO nodded, looking intrigued by this unexpected turn of events. Please do. Maya took a deep breath and launched into her presentation. Not Greg's safe version, not Elise's rehashed ideas, but her own vision, the one she had poured her heart into over countless late nights and weekends. Westfield isn't just facing a branding challenge, she began. You're confronting a fundamental shift in how consumers experience retail spaces. The question isn't how to make your brand more visible, but how to make it more valuable in a world where online convenience is constantly competing for your customer's attention. She advanced to the first slide of her presentation, not a traditional market analysis, but a visual representation of the emotional journey Westfield customers experienced in their stores versus online. The room grew quiet as the Westfield team leaned forward, suddenly engaged. As Maya continued, she could feel the energy in the room transforming. Catherine was nodding enthusiastically. The Westfield CEO had put down her phone and was watching with full attention. Even the CFO, who had seemed bored throughout Greg's presentation, was now taking detailed notes. Thomas and Greg exchanged looks of surprise and confusion, but neither interrupted her. They could sense what Maya already knew. She was saving the meeting. For 20 minutes, Maya presented her vision for Westfield's future, not just a rebranding, but a reimagining of how their spaces could serve as community hubs, experiential centers, and fulfillment locations for online purchases. Her approach wove together physical and digital experiences in ways that honored Westfield's heritage, while pushing boldly into new territory. When she finished, the room fell silent. Maya's heart pounded as she waited for someone to speak. Had she overstepped? Would Thomas fire her on the spot for hijacking the presentation? The Westfield CEO was the first to break the silence. She set down her pen and looked directly at Maya. "Now that," she said slowly, "is what we came here to see." Catherine began to applaud, and the rest of the Westfield team quickly joined in. Maya stood frozen in place, hardly able to believe what was happening. They were applauding her, not Elise. Not Greg, but her. Thomas stepped forward, his expression a complex mixture of shock, relief, and something that might have been respect. "Well," he said, clapping Maya on the shoulder, "it seems our production assistant has been holding out on us." Greg laughed good-naturedly. "I'd say she just saved all our jobs." The room erupted in laughter, breaking the tension. As the Westfield team began asking questions about implementation timelines and budget allocations, Maya caught Thomas's eye again. This time there was no warning in his gaze, only a dawning recognition of what had been right in front of him all along. The helper had stepped into the spotlight, and she had silenced the room not with a whisper, but with a vision that no one could ignore. The days following the Westfield presentation passed in a whirlwind of congratulations, confusion, and recalibration. Maya found herself suddenly visible in ways she had never experienced before. People who had barely acknowledged her existence now stopped by her desk to chat. Senior staff who had once delegated their coffee runs to her now asked for her opinions on client strategies. The Westfield team had signed the contract before leaving the building that Thursday afternoon, not just agreeing to the proposed work, but increasing their budget by 30% to fully implement Maya's vision. It was the largest account win in BrightSpark's history. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after Elise's departure, Thomas called Maya into his office. She had expected this conversation, though she wasn't sure how it would go. Her bold move during the presentation could easily be seen as insubordination rather than initiative. Thomas's office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and carefully selected modern art, had always intimidated Maya. Today, however, she walked in with her head held high. "Take a seat," Thomas said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. His expression gave nothing away. Maya sat, hands folded in her lap, and waited. "I've been doing a lot of thinking over the weekend," Thomas began. "About Thursday's presentation, about the agency, about you." Maya nodded but didn't speak. "What you did was completely outside protocol," he continued. "You undermined a senior creative director and went against the strategy we had approved as a team." Here it comes, Maya thought. The token appreciation followed by the gentle reminder to stay in her lane. And it was absolutely the right call. She blinked, not sure she had heard him correctly. Thomas leaned forward, his usual polished demeanor giving way to something more genuine. "Maya, I've been running this agency for 15 years. In that time, I've seen plenty of talented people come through these doors. But what you showed on Thursday wasn't just talent, it was courage and conviction." "Thank you," Maya said, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "The question now is what to do about it." Thomas picked up a folder from his desk and opened it. "I've been reviewing your employment history. You joined us 3 years ago as a production assistant, And despite consistently positive performance reviews, you've never been promoted. Maya couldn't help the small, bitter smile that crossed her face. That's correct. That's a failure on our part, Thomas said bluntly. Specifically, it's a failure on my part. I allowed myself to be dazzled by Elise's presentations without looking closely at who was doing the actual work. He closed the folder and met Maya's eyes directly. I'd like to offer you the position of creative director, effective immediately. The words hung in the air between them. Maya had imagined this moment so many times. The recognition, the promotion, the chance to finally step out of the shadows. But now that it was happening, she found herself hesitating. Before I answer, she said carefully, I'd like to understand what that role would look like. Thomas raised an eyebrow. It would look like Elise's position, leading client presentations, directing creative strategy, managing a team of designers and copywriters. Maya took a deep breath. With all due respect, I don't want Elise's job. I don't understand. The star system didn't just fail me, Thomas. It failed the agency. Maya leaned forward, surprising herself with her own conviction. Elise left and suddenly we were in crisis because everything revolved around her. That's not a sustainable way to run a creative team. Thomas frowned. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that instead of simply promoting me into Elise's role, we rethink how our creative department functions. Maya pulled a document from her bag. Another late night. Another vision she had prepared just in case this moment came. I've outlined a structure that emphasizes collaborative leadership and shared credit. Thomas took the document reluctantly. Maya, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but organizational restructuring is a complex process that requires careful consideration by the leadership team. Of course, Maya agreed. But consider this. Last week you were willing to lose your biggest client rather than put someone without a fancy title in front of them. How many other opportunities has the agency missed because of that kind of thinking? Her boldness surprised them both. A week ago, she would never have spoken to the CEO this way, but something had fundamentally changed when she stepped up to that presentation. She had found her voice and she wasn't about to lose it again. Thomas was silent for a long moment, studying the document she had given him. Finally, he looked up. This would mean significant changes to how we operate. Yes, it would. And you think it would make us stronger? I know it would. Maya's voice was quiet but firm. Because the next time a star performer leaves, we'll have a bench of talented people ready to step up, not just one helper scrambling to save the day. The corner of Thomas's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. You've given this a lot of thought. I've had 3 years to think about it. Thomas closed the document and set it aside. I can't promise to implement all of these changes, but I can promise to consider them seriously, with input from the full leadership team, which will now include you. As creative director? As executive creative director, Thomas extended his hand across the desk, with a particular focus on organizational culture and talent development. Assuming you accept, of course. Maya stood and shook his hand, her grip firm and confident. I accept. The weeks that followed tested Maya's new role and vision in ways she hadn't anticipated. Some senior staff resented the rapid promotion of someone they still saw as a production assistant. Others welcomed the changes but struggled to adapt to more collaborative processes after years of working under Elise's star system. Throughout it all, Maya maintained the quiet determination that had sustained her during her years in the shadows. She listened more than she spoke. She gave credit freely and publicly. She stayed late not to do others' work, but to ensure everyone had the support and resources they needed to succeed. Gradually, the culture began to shift. The creative team started functioning less as satellites orbiting a central star, and more as a constellation of equals, each with their own strengths and contributions. 3 months after her promotion, Maya sat in the same conference room where she had delivered the Westfield presentation. This time, she wasn't fighting for recognition. She was leading a workshop on collaborative creative processes for the entire agency. As she looked around at the faces watching her, some still skeptical, others openly supportive, she caught sight of a familiar figure at the back of the room. The night security guard had stopped by on his way to begin his shift. He gave her a small nod and a thumbs up before continuing on his rounds. Maya smiled to herself, then turned back to the team. Let's talk about how we can build something together that's stronger than any one of us could create alone. Later that evening, as the office emptied out, Maya found herself staying late once again. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to finalize a proposal for a new client. The work still energized her, even if her role had changed dramatically. Catherine from Westfield called just as Maya was packing up to leave. "I hoped I'd catch you," Catherine said. "I wanted to let you know that our board approved the full implementation of your Experience Center's concept. It's going to roll out to all our flagship locations next quarter." "That's fantastic news," Maya replied. "The team will be thrilled." "The team," Catherine repeated with a knowing laugh. "You know, Maya, it's okay to take some credit yourself. You're the one who came up with the concept." Maya smiled as she looked around the darkened office. Actually, it was a collaborative effort. Different now than it used to be, but still not just me. Well, whoever deserves the credit, it's brilliant work. We've never been more excited about our relationship with Bright Spark. After ending the call, Maya gathered her things and headed toward the elevator. As she waited, she caught her reflection in the polished metal doors. The woman looking back at her stood straight and confident, no longer trying to make herself smaller or less noticeable. The star performer had left, but she hadn't just taken her spotlight with her. She had inadvertently created the opportunity for something better to emerge. Not a new star, but a new way of seeing, working, and leading. As Maya stepped into the elevator, she thought about the journey of the past 3 months. From helper to leader, from invisible to influential, from silent to silencing the room. But the most meaningful change wasn't in her title or her salary, or even her newfound recognition. It was in the culture she was helping to create. One where no one would have to spend years in the shadows before their light could shine. One where success wasn't measured by individual stardom but by collective brilliance. The elevator doors closed, and Maya pressed the button for the lobby. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new opportunities to test her vision. But for the first time in her career, she wasn't just helping someone else succeed. She was building something that mattered, something that would last long after any single star had faded from view.